All right. Hello, everyone. I'm the Catholic Christian. Today we have a very special guest, a former practicing Catholic who left the church and is now agnostic. However, this gentleman is still open to perhaps maybe coming back to the Catholic Church, and he wants to make sure that he did not make a mistake. In the past 2 years, he's even discoursed with Jimmy Akin, Swan Sona, Brian Holdsworth, and now he's discoursing with me in this interview. And this gentleman is Kevin, and he has his own channel called, what is it, Kevin?
Kevin Non-Tradicath.
There you go. So Kevin, thank you so much for coming on my channel today. How are you?
I'm good, Eric. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm honored to be here. You listed the people I've spoken with, but as everybody in the audience will already know, I've clearly saved the best for last. So thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I appreciate that. But so we met on a live stream of mine where I had the platform open for people to come in and to dialogue and or debate, and you jumped on and we had a little discussion and then we exchanged some information. And I think your journey, your whole entire life, especially in the Catholic world, is very, very intriguing. And so I would like you to just basically introduce yourself to everybody, and give a little condensed version of your life journey, and then we'll go into questions if that's okay with you.
That sounds great. Yeah. And tell you what I'll do right now too is I'll tell the story. I'll keep it nice and condensed, and then I'll kind of let you ask the questions to flesh it out. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect. Great, Kevin. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. So I guess the story kind of starts shortly after the Second Vatican Council. So my grandparents immigrated from Ireland to the United States. They didn't love all the changes that were brought about from the Second Vatican Council, and so they wanted to buy an abandoned Protestant church and then have the traditional Latin Mass said there. So that's just what they did. It was an unincorporated Catholic church for a little while, which just means that priests were coming in and saying the traditional Latin Mass, but there were no priests assigned to the chapel, and the chapel wasn't part of any kind of archdiocese or anything like that. But after a while, there was a vote, and the chapel voted on whether they should join the FSSP or the SSPX. We could talk about the differences between the two later if we want, but the chapel decided to join the FSSP. So I was born a couple years after this vote. I was born into the FSSP, which is a traditionalist Catholic organization, fraternity. So I grew up going to this chapel almost 7 days a week, I would say. I went to school there. So my teachers were like, it was a school, but it was also kind of like a homeschool co-op type deal. Like my teachers were my friends' parents. So I went to school there from 1st through 8th grade. So I would go there Monday through Friday for school. I would go there Sunday for Mass, obviously. I would attend Mass first thing for school. So Monday through Friday, I was attending Mass in the morning. And then on Saturdays, occasionally, I would be at the chapel. If it wasn't for like a youth group function, maybe it was for confession. And if it wasn't either of those, then I wasn't there on Saturday. And then I only went 6 days a week. But as you can imagine, the chapel and being a traditionalist Catholic was kind of like my whole life, right? It was like, the whole thing. And there's a lot of stuff that comes with being a traditionalist Catholic, especially at that time. For your audience, I was born in 95. So I was growing up like in the early 2000s. And being a traditionalist in the early 2000s meant certain things, one of which was being a young earth creationist. All trads were young earth creationists back then. So I grew up a young earth creationist, right? And then I went to a public high school. And I had a very patient high school biology teacher dealing with my question. Teacher, did you know that humans and dinosaurs walk side by side? And, poor biology teacher had to say, Kevin, that's not really how it happened. And so you can imagine that kind of like shook me a little bit, right? I grew up and everybody was telling me that young earth creationism is true. And they were wrong about that. Mm-hmm. Could they be wrong about something else? Now, at this time, I was 14, 15 years old. I remained Catholic for almost another decade after that. But I think in some ways we can kind of draw the beginning of my eventual leaving the Catholic Church to young earth creationism. Again, that's not the reason I left, but I think it's the start, the first crack in the armor, as it were. So I go through high school, I get into college. I attended a Polytechnic Institute. So that's just there were no liberal arts at this college. It was just maths and sciences and stuff. The New Jersey Institute of Technology. I got my degree in chemical engineering. But while I was there, I started thinking about other things. So this school, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, it's one of the most diverse schools in the nation, I believe. White people make up like a third of the school, I think. And there's a ton of Hindus there. There's a ton of Muslims there, and there's also just like a ton of like other national, like there was like a lot of like Chinese students, and I think by and large the Chinese students that I rubbed elbows with just weren't religious in the slightest. So Christians probably only made up 20% of the school. And I remember thinking, like, these Muslims here and these Hindus here, like, they seem like they're just as devout as I am. Are they just as sure in what they believe as I am in what I believe? And if I am, do I have the reasons to back up what I believe? Are my reasons good enough? Geez, I've always thought that they were, but I don't know if I ever did my homework that well. So let me do the homework. Let me kind of throw myself into studying religion. So I started doing that when I was like 18, 19, 20, 21. Also at this time, I wound up having a really close friend of mine come out as gay. And I was like, I know that this is immoral, like, because, that's what I've been taught, but I don't actually like know why it's immoral. Like, so I better look into that too. Right. So I'm looking into like, kind of just the whole sexual ethic type thing. I'm looking into things like the fewness of the saved and stuff like that. Like why? That was kind of the big question. And over time I kind of realized, like, I don't think that I actually believe all the stuff that I had been told to believe growing up. And I always believed it because that's just what I had been told. But once I started doing my homework, once I started looking up things like teleology, right, to kind of try to understand why it is that gay marriage is not permissible. Once I started looking up things like textual criticism of the New Testament to figure out why we can be so confident that Jesus rose from the dead, stuff like that, I realized, wow, I don't think that I am as confident, or rather, I was way more confident than I should have been this whole time. So I kind of stopped thinking of myself as Catholic, probably as early as age like 19 and 20. I was definitely still Christian, though. I was attending Cru meetings. That's Campus Crusade for Christ, but they shortened their name to Cru a number of years ago. But that was kind of a short-lived phase. And I think by the time that I was roughly 22, I didn't consider myself really Christian at all anymore. I was just kind of agnostic. Then I got a job offer that was going to move me 700 miles away. And I told my parents, and they were like, oh, okay, cool. They didn't care about moving far away. But I had been dating this girl for 5 years. And they said, is she moving with you? And I said something very stupid. I said, Mom, don't ask questions that you don't want to know the answer to. That was a mistake, as you can imagine. I come from a family where nobody had left the Catholic Church before me. And for the record, so I'm only the second oldest of only 4 kids, but I grew up a mile down the road from my 7 cousins. And out of the 11 of us, the 4 plus 7, I'm like right in the middle of the pack, I guess. I'm like the 5th oldest out of the 11. And nobody had left the church. So when I told my parents that I was essentially in open rebellion, right, it didn't go well. They were scared, right? They thought that if I did move out with a girl before I was married to her, I was putting my eternal soul at risk, right? I'm standing on the proverbial train track and there's a train coming and my parents need to shake me and scream at me until I jump off of the train track, right? So what they tried to do, I think what they tried to do was scare her into leaving. Because what they told me is, look, like, you're disowned unless you marry her. Not only are you disowned, but they said a couple other things too, like your grandparents will die of broken hearts, and their deaths will be your fault. They said that they would kill me, and that is an exact quote. If my younger siblings found out about my apostasy, they told me that they would have preferred me to be addicted to heroin rather than not be Catholic, because at least the heroin addict would admit that like he knows that it's wrong to be addicted to heroin. But I didn't think that I was wrong for leaving the church. So all these kind of like really hurtful things. And as you can imagine, I was a kid. I was 22. So I asked my girlfriend to marry me. I said, "Hey, I don't want to lose my family. Will you marry me?" As my cat hits my camera. And because she is a ride or die, the coolest girl you'll ever meet, she said, "Yeah, we were going to get married eventually anyway. Let's just do it." So we had a 3-month, it was technically a 4-month long engagement, which is the shortest that my parish priest could do without needing special permission from the bishop. But it was late July to early October. And so, you know, July, August, September, October, boom, 4 months. We're good to go. So we got married in 4 months, 3 months really. And we promptly moved 700 miles away and started a new life. As you can imagine, me being forced into a marriage at the threat of, you know, all that stuff left like a really sour taste in my mouth. And I kind of already considered myself not Catholic at that point. I was still going to mass every week, just, you know, with my family. But after that point, I was no longer going to mass anymore. So then I was 22, living in a new state. And I thought to myself, well, I'm gone, right? I mean, I left, kind of. Did I make a mistake? Let me really throw myself into this. And I'm 29 today. And so for the past 7 years, I've just been really throwing myself into as much study as I possibly can, trying to make sure that I didn't make a mistake, right? Or at least if I am making a mistake, it's a mistake that I'm making not for not trying, right? I want to leave it all on the field. If I die and I'm wrong, I want to be able to tell God, I gave it my best shot. I really did. And so I'm not back in the church yet, but I'm also only 29. 7 years of study isn't that much. I mean, people dedicate their whole lives to studying Catholicism, and they don't exhaust everything that you can study. So I think that I have a long road yet to go. And so that's you know, I said I would keep it short, and I totally didn't. But that about brings. I started my YouTube channel 2 years ago, and I've been using my YouTube channel as a way to further that journey. You know, I found that reading books was great, but talking to the experts was even better. And so that's why I made the YouTube channel. It was very selfish, right? It was just because I wanted to be able to talk to these experts. But I've been able to, and it's been great. And people have been able to learn with me along the way. Which has been a very rewarding experience. So let me end it there. But that was a not that brief story of where I've been.
No, I think you're good. I think that was just like 10 minutes. If you were 30 minutes, we'd maybe have a problem there. But I want to ask you, I'm really curious regarding your childhood in the FSSP school. Now, going to mass every day, praying the rosary every day. I believe you said you went to confession once a week. Did you get a sense of rigidity, or how did you feel as a student? I think it was what, first grade through 8th grade, or K through 8? How was that experience? How did it make you feel looking back? I mean, was it too much? Was it overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely way too much. Anybody who goes to that school would say, yeah, that's way too much. Like any kid will say that's way too much. I think there are certain kinds of parents who will say, no, it's not enough. Like, you know, but if you're asking me, yeah, it's so rigid. It's super rigid. We were getting, the way that I described my upbringing was that it was your kind of, imagine your typical kind of evangelical fire and brimstone, but Catholic. You know, like that's how I grew up. We would hear sermons. Saint Leonard of Port Maurice has a famous sermon on the fewness of the saved. And I think that like every single year, we would hear that sermon. Like the priests would sometimes just read a sermon from a saint instead of reading their own sermon. So like we would read about the fewness of the saved. And when we didn't only believe that all of the non-Catholics were almost definitely not going to be saved. But like most of the Novus Ordo Catholics were also going to hell because they're not taking it seriously. If they were serious, they'd be at the traditional Latin Mass. That's just how we were the elect almost, we had the hidden knowledge that nobody else had, this traditionalist movement. And keep in mind, 20 years ago, the traditionalist movement was a lot smaller than it is today too. It's grown hugely since COVID, really.
Yeah.
But in the pre-COVID world, the traditionalist movement was a lot more insular, right? A lot smaller. So growing up like that was very rigid, yes.
Yeah, because, in of itself, going to mass every day, praying the rosary every day, going to confession once a week, in itself is obvious. I mean, that's what I do, but I am a full-grown adult. I'm obviously emancipated from the authority of my parents and stuff like that. So that's my decision to have a first grader kind of that's that way of life for a first grader or whatever for 8 years. It almost seems like I'm not putting this label on you or your experience, but you could almost see it as pharisaical because the Pharisees, they were infatuated with obeying the law, any form of the law to the nth degree, but they made that the end. So the law is not an end, it's a means to an end, right? And I've noticed a lot of the traditionalism going, the TLMers and all that stuff. They make the liturgy and, their certain devotions and everything, their whole paradigm into an end, not a means, because everything should be ordered towards love of God and love of neighbor, not just, you have to go to the TLM. You have to pray the rosary every day. You have to believe in young earth creationism. No, that's like oppressive. And I just get this. Did you, looking back, do you feel that way? Like, you get those vibes or anything?
100%. Yeah. And also it wasn't just the rosary. It was the rosary in Latin, right? Like we said the rosary in Latin. Now, not in first grade. We had to learn how to pray the rosary in Latin. Oh, it's funny though. There was like a stigma. Like if you sent a first grader to this school and they didn't already know how to say the Hail Mary and the Glory Be and the Our Father, like you were failing as a parent if your first grader didn't know how to say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be at least already. But then we would learn in school how to pray it in Latin, and we would say the rosary in Latin as well, because Latin just makes everything holier, obviously.
Right.
So yeah, it was very strict and rigid, like about weird things too. Like chapel veils, were not they were not optional. Like if you were a student and you were a girl, you had to wear a chapel veil. Things like pants, like the pants debate was like a live for women, of course. Like that was like a live debate at my chapel. My family kind of came. I do have a sister. My family kind of came down on the side of pants are okay. Definitely like in the house. But they should never be like they should be like baggy, And then if you're going out, it should probably be skirts, no pants for women at church, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
At church, no woman is wearing pants. No, that would be improper.
Mm-hmm.
But there were other families that were more strict, and then also there were other families that are less strict. And I also should add too that I've been out for 7 years now. My understanding is that during COVID there was an influx of like Novus Ordo Catholics who kind of became trad. And I think that the influx of Novus Ordo Catholics has caused some of them to chill out. So I think that today you'll see more pants at the chapel that I grew up in than you would 20 years ago. That's my understanding. I haven't been there, so I don't know. But I also know that I think by and large, the average person who attends that chapel is not a young earth creationist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it has changed a lot, I believe, in the past 20 years. I can only speak to 13 of those 20 years, obviously. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there too, that I do think that the population has de-radicalized somewhat over time. I can't really speak to that because I haven't been there, but it was very radical when I was there.
Yeah. How do you feel about Pope Francis restricting the TLM and just in general, how, you know, the motive for him doing that and the cause for him doing that has to go back to like the ideology of the liturgy, right? So how do you feel about that?
Um, I should preface this by saying that as somebody who's not a practicing Catholic, my opinion doesn't really matter. But you asked for it, so I'll give it anyway. And it's, I think that Pope Francis's heart was in the right place, and I even think that like, in some kind of ideal world where like, you know, whatever the Pope puts in motion will actually legitimately be put into motion, then yeah, I think that's not a bad idea, because you are right. You know, there is like some kind of almost like idolatry of the liturgy going on. Um, but all that I think that Traditionis Custodes did indeed accomplish was further radicalization. You know, I think that it just makes people to kind of double down,
Mm.
because like a lot of trads, I think, have this kind of like persecution complex thing going on where it's like, oh, you know, the Vatican II sect, they hate us and they know that we're the real church and that's why they want to suppress us.
Oh,
And so then when Pope Francis tries to restrict the Latin, see, the Vatican II sect is suppressing us. And, okay, you know, so
okay.
I well intentioned, but probably not effective.
Okay.
Is my 2 cents.
Okay, let's go back to the young earth creationism. So, and I don't want to, this is not about me, but it'll be relative to your experience in our discussion. So I converted to Catholicism 10 years ago. I grew up as a confessional Lutheran. We had to believe in young earth creationism. Uh, I mean, most Protestants do, you know. And the one thing when I was going through RCIA, my whole conversion process, the one thing that tripped me up or like I was, cautioning was when my RCIA director said, the Catholic Church does not enforce you to one or the other. It doesn't limit or reduce the creation accounts to young earth creationism. And I cannot tell you the feeling I had when he said that. My mind was blown. Like, what do you mean? Genesis 1 and 2? Genesis 1, there was morning, there was evening, the first day. It's clear as day.
There it is.
Yeah, like, and that's that literalistic sense of interpreting the scriptures. But when I read St. Augustine, and he's like, yeah, well, the sun wasn't created until the fourth day. So how could you have 24-hour period days for those first 3 days? Anyways, it's not about me. So how did you feel? Like, how did you feel in that biology class or with that biology teacher when she, kind of told you what she told you about the dinosaurs and walking, on the earth being older than 6,000 years?
I mean, so in a word, betrayed, I think.
Mhm.
But let me even back it up a little bit. So before I even got to high school, I think I was probably in 7th grade. A priest was stationed at our church who was not a member of the FSSP.
Okay.
This priest was uh, like a Novus Ordo priest who wound his mother lived not so far from this chapel, and he was becoming interested in the traditional Latin mass. He approached the bishop and said something to the effect of like, hey, my mother is sick, I'm her only son, like I'm stationed on the other side of the country or whatever right now, I really need to be stationed in New Jersey so that I can take care of my old mother. Um, by the way, I've been really looking into the Latin Mass. Can you station me at Our Lady of Fatima? The FSSP church. So he wasn't an FSSP priest, but he was traditional adjacent, let's say. He was also, however, a dual master's degree owner in like physical chemistry and in organic chemistry or something like that. So incredibly intelligent man, and notably not FSSP. So he got to the chapel and he told us, guys, it's actually been okay to believe in evolution for like a few decades now. And we rioted. There was actually one Sunday mass when he said something like that from the pulpit, like it's okay to believe in the old earth. And somebody stood up and said, these are grave errors that Father is speaking from the pulpit. Like, can you imagine standing up during mass and addressing the congregation, telling them that the priest is wrong. What the heck? But yeah, so that happened. But so I did. Okay, great. I have permission to believe in the old earth, but come on, I can read. I know what Genesis says.
Right.
I don't believe it.
Right.
And then I got to high school. And so in grammar school, we used the Abeka brand of textbook. They are evangelical Protestant brand textbooks, but they have science books. And they teach you the science of young earth creationism. Now, it's all really poor. It's the science is quite poor.
Yeah.
So I got to high school and I started learning real science. And I felt betrayed because, wait, I was learning all this stuff in 7th and 8th grade, from my Abeka brand science books. All this stuff is wrong. But I also had permission already in the back of my brain. I had permission from this new priest who said it's actually okay. And so I think I kind of let myself believe it once I was convinced by the evidence. But I was so betrayed because I'm like, I know that I can, but I've been told that I shouldn't this whole time because the science supported young earth creationism. But now that I'm actually looking at the science, that's not the case at all. So I felt betrayed.
Yeah, I'm just saying I can empathize because I've been in that situation because my whole life I was indoctrinated to believe that, all of creation goes back 6,000 years and that's it. I do want to I don't mean to switch radically here to another topic, but the fewness of the saved. Now that obviously has been a theological speculation going back since the Gospels. And I do know that there are some sedevacantists. I don't know too much SSPX or FSSP, but sedevacantists love to double down on this theological speculation. And they quote certain saints having private revelation, like Saint Dominic and whatnot. And they just run with it. And okay, so I have a couple of questions for you. So, I mean, how do you personally feel about it? Like the fewness of the saved, just because I know you're in a different situation now because you're not practicing and you're agnostic. How did you feel about it then? How do you feel about it now? And do like the FSSP and SSPX, do they use it as a form of like ideology, indoctrination, stuff like that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So they absolutely did use it as a form of indoctrination. When I was there, again, like I said, the chapel that I attended growing up, I think has de-radicalized since I left. So maybe that's not true anymore, but it was true when I was there. When I was growing up, I really didn't think it was odd. Like it's in many are called, but few are chosen. Like, boom, it's right there. Okay, great. Fewness of the saved, right? So there you go. Checks out. And you hear it from the pulpit every Sunday. You at least think that you're reading it in the Gospels, and also everybody that you know is also a trad. So like, I don't know anybody who isn't one of the few who are going to be saved. So I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about my best buddy who's going to go to hell for eternity. You know what I mean? I didn't have to think about it. So I didn't think it was weird because I didn't really think about it at all, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And then I got to high school in northern New Jersey where almost everybody's Catholic anyway. And so maybe in high school I was like, oh, well, there's a lot of Novus Ordo Catholics. Well, maybe it's okay for the Novus Ordo Catholics to go to heaven too. Okay, fine.
Sorry.
But I was still kind of insulated from non-Catholics anyway. Yeah. But then I got to college, and then I was rubbing elbows with like Hindus and Muslims and atheists, like I said. Yeah. And then I was really confronted with the doctrine of the fewness of the saved. Yeah. And I just couldn't wrap my head around an all-loving God who was going to damn like the vast majority of humanity to hell forever.
Yeah.
Like that just didn't make sense to me. And I still feel that way to this day. Obviously, for me, today, I'm agnostic about the existence of God.
Mhm.
So it's not like I'm not a universalist because I'm agnostic, right? But if I was a theist, I would almost definitely be a universalist on some kind of like, well, unless I didn't think that God was all good, I guess. Um, yeah, I find the fewness of the saved to be, and I'll use a word here that's it's a strong word, repulsive. I find the fewness of the save like repulsive. Um, I think that it's a doctrine that people only teach. Not only that's too strong of a word, but I think that it's a doctrine that is very effective at controlling a population.
Mm.
And I think that it has a big utility there, and I think that's why it's used a lot.
That is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like I've been trying to figure out how to put my finger on it. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Control a population. It's that cult-like mentality almost.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bad news, only the few are saved. Good news, everybody here is part of the few. So you better not leave us because
Yeah.
you're one of the elect few.
I know, right? Oh my gosh. Just so again, I don't want to, I want to keep asking you questions, but it's just, I can't help it. So like in the Old Testament, God says to Abraham, look at the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, like your descendants. And really those descendants are spiritual brothers and sisters in Christ. And then if you read in the book of Revelation that there was saints without number of every ethnicity, tongue, background, everything like that. So when I personally read, many are called, few are chosen, that few is not a small number or a small cult-like number. That few is a big number, but in proportion perhaps to all human beings that have ever lived and will live, there's your proportionate few to the many. That's kind of how I took it. Now, here are my questions. Have you read Lumen Gentium?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you read Hans von Osbarth or Hans von? Wait, you haven't or you have?
I have not read any von Balthasar. I have not read any Skillebex. I have not read any
Carl
all
Rahner.
those kind of like 20th century guys. I really haven't read many of those theologians.
Well, let me ask you this, and then we'll switch topics here. Do you think it's permissible for us to hope, the key word is hope, that all men will be saved in the end?
Oh, I mean, again, my opinion shouldn't really matter a whole lot.
Oh, it does
But you
matter.
asked for it, so I'll give it.
It absolutely does matter.
Yeah,
Me,
I mean,
to me.
well, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Bishop Barron, his whole thing is that he hopes that all are saved and all that. See, I haven't read, and I forget if this is von Balthasar or if this is Skillebex or who this is. It might even be David Bentley Hart or someone. But there was a recent theologian who told this. They painted a picture of like you can imagine an all-loving God, right? So which God is going to be more all-loving? The God that would descend into hell and suffer next to you for as long as it takes for you to accept his friendship. Is that more loving, or the God who abandons you to your misery? And I happen to think that the first God is more loving, and if God is all loving, then it would be that. So I don't only think that a Catholic can, I even think that a Catholic should have hope that all will be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And people like Bishop Barron seem to agree. So
I agree. I'm on the same page. The key word is hope. So in one of the Eucharistic prayers, we pray for the salvation of all men. Well, if we can't have a hope for all men to be saved, why would we pray? The divine mercy chaplet. How about the Fatima prayer in the Rosary?
You know what's funny though is we would point to Fatima as evidence of the fewness of the saved because of is it the first or the second secret? It's the one about hell. I forget.
Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
Just Lucia saw hell's falling. Souls falling into hell like snowflakes from the sky. Yeah. Oh, snowflakes. There's very many of those. So, in comparison, only the few are, you see where that goes.
Well, you've discussed or you've had Jimmy Akin on your channel and stuff. He makes a very good point with private revelation, especially with Fatima, how you should not take that to mean as, because private revelation, even if it's approved, you cannot get into the details and the elements and that translate that to like a dogmatic statement or even theological speculation. Sure, but yeah, you got to be careful with that.
So if I was Catholic, I would almost certainly not believe in Fatima for specific reasons that I'm happy to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just very briefly list a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to spend time here, fantastic. If not, we can quickly move on. But little things about Fatima that nobody mentions.
Mm-hmm.
Lucia said that Our Lady told her that World War I would end on October 13th, 1917. And when the priest came to interview her the week after Fatima, he was like, Lucia, did you say October 13th? And Lucia's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Our
Dude.
Lady told me. No, obviously, I'm transliterating,
I know.
but she's like, I don't know what to tell you. Our Lady told me that the soldiers would be coming home on the 13th, and that World War One would. They didn't call it World War One, obviously, at the time, but the war is ending and the soldiers are coming home.
Mm-hmm.
As we know from history, the war stretched on for another 13 months, more than a year after October 1917. The war didn't end until November 1918. Okay, that's a little fishy.
Mm-hmm.
But Our Lady also told Lucia that her cousins would die soon, right? And sure enough, they did die in 1919 and 1920.
Mm-hmm.
When did Lucia reveal to the world that Our Lady told her that her cousins would die? Not until 1927.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1927, Lucia says, by the way, in 1917, Our Lady told me that Lucia and Francisco would Jacinta and Francisco would die soon, but that I would live on a while longer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's easy to say in 1927. They've been dead for 7 years already.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about Our Lady's prophecy about the end of World War I and then the start of World War II, right? Because Our Lady specifically told Lucia that it would be during the reign of Pope Saint of Pope, and I forget the reign of the Pope who started like in 1939. Lucia didn't reveal that prophecy until 1941, after the war was in full swing. Nobody knows this about Fatima, and don't get me wrong, I think that something crazy happened that day with like the sun. I think something crazy happened. Now, when I say crazy, I don't necessarily mean it literally danced in the sky, but something wild happened enough that like it was in the newspaper and people told stories about it. Granted, I do think the stories exaggerate over time. And so like these interviews with people who are in their 70s, and like this interview is occurring in the 1970s, and like, what they were 10 years old when Fatima happened. Like, okay, I don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are contemporaneous accounts of something kind of spooky happening. I do think that something spooky happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that Lucia herself is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So investing stock in private revelations, I know a lot of people, they're very radical with their private revelations. Like, I'm devoted to Our Lady of Fatima, and I don't have a problem with anything you said, because that doesn't matter to me at all, because the details, the pedantics, that doesn't matter to me. It's just a private revelation. They were not divinely inspired, right? They were kids, and seers oftentimes get details and elements off, and they're not, precise. So any private revelation, really, Saint Faustina or Saint Margaret Mary of Alacoque, hey, when it comes down to the end of the day, for Catholics, it's the liturgy, the sacrifice of the Mass, and it's the liturgical prayers that take precedence over any private devotion or prayer or revelation. So really, there's no obligation to pray the rosary, to be devoted to Our Lady of Fatima, or any of that. There's you have to be devoted to Our Lady, but not Fatima. So let's leave Fatima on the back burner for maybe another topic. So I want to get back to your high school experience. I'm sorry, your college experience rather, and the New Jersey Institute of Technology, or okay, in Newark, New Jersey, New Jersey.
No, nobody actually talks like that in New Jersey, for the
Okay.
record. The entire cast of Jersey Shore, do you know where they were from? New York.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh.
All
That's
of them except
cool.
for one. I forget which one. But like Snooki, she's from New York. She's from Long Island. Um, I I forget which one. One of them is from New Jersey, but the rest of them are from New York. So they're giving us a bad name.
Kevin, I would have never imagined 40 minutes ago before this started that Snooki from the Jersey Shore would have come up in this discussion.
We're covering a lot of ground today.
Holy cow. Anyways, college experience. You already mentioned that it was kind of a melting pot, if you will, different ethnicities and religious backgrounds. Could you maybe explain or go into a little more about, okay, so that was a 4-year experience, and what happened in those 4 years to where in your senior year, you're like, I'm going to make the conscious choice to not practice my Catholic faith anymore and become agnostic? What was that? Or was it a combination of things? Or why don't you?
It was 100% a combination of things. Yeah, there was no like light bulb moment where I'm like, oh wow, I'm not Catholic anymore. But those light bulb, those individual things that all kind of built up were, so I mentioned the whole. I had a friend who came out. He's like, yeah, I'm gay, and I said, I know that's wrong, but I don't know why. So let me look into that. So I started reading up about teleology, and so your audience might not be super familiar with teleology. But Aristotle taught that there's 4 causes. There's the efficient cause, the formal cause, the material cause, and the final cause. Or in Greek, the telos, the final cause, the end, the purpose, the telos. So teleology is the study of those final causes, the study of the purposes of things. And all of like Catholic sexual ethics is built on teleology. And I came to the conclusion that teleology just wasn't veridical. And this happened in a very particular context for me, right? So I'm studying chemical engineering. So I'm studying what I understand to be the universe as it really is. So when I'm studying about, why certain molecules react with other molecules in certain ways, we don't talk in Aristotelian physics anymore, right? We don't even I mean, sometimes we talk in Newtonian physics, but you can think about it like there's been like these 3 main physics, right? There was Aristotle's physics, and those were good. Don't get me wrong; they lasted for a long time. But then Newton came around, and he kind of revolutionized. We kind of got to put Aristotle on the back burner. Newton's physics were a lot better than Aristotle's. Fantastic. And then Einstein happened, and now we kind of put Newton on the back burner, and Einstein's physics are what we think are the best. And it'll happen again, right? Like science is constantly changing. But I realized that teleology was just kind of Aristotle's way of describing the world, and I really didn't think that was a veridical, truth-bearing way to describe the world. So I was like, ooh, I guess I kind of disagree with the Catholic Church with regards to their kind of the sexual ethic piece of it. Wait a minute. If I think that Aristotle was wrong about like teleology, what about Aristotle's view on like substances and accidents? Or Aristotle would talk about substance and essence and stuff like that. I came to the conclusion that I didn't believe in essences or substances. People use these words differently to mean different things or the same things depending on what time in history. But I realized that I didn't believe in what Catholics would refer to as substances. So transubstantiation is this idea that the accidents remain unchanged, but the substance does change. So the substance used to be bread and the accidents were bread. But then after transubstantiation, the accidents are still bread, but the substance is now the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. I realized that I didn't believe in substances anymore. And I realized that I thought that things are what their accidents are. So you kind of can't have transubstantiation if you don't have substances. So like, oh, that became a problem. So I disagree with my upbringing on evolution and young Earth creationism and all that. I can kind of put that to the wayside. That's not that big of a deal. But then the bigger deals are the disagreements about teleology, the disagreements about substances and transubstantiation. I also started getting into like kind of the textual criticism side of things. So I realized that like I just my confidence in like reading these stories in the New Testament, I used to be very confident that like we could think like, yeah, like these are like an accurate retelling of things as they actually happened. My confidence in that decreased over that time too. So those are just some of the main areas that I really started researching in college that I kind of like lost confidence in. And what prompted me to do that research was seeing all of these Muslims and Hindus who were so confident in their faiths. And I was like, well, I should do my homework. So I did my homework in those areas, hoping to become more confident. And instead, I think I realized that my prior confidence was not I hadn't earned my level of confidence. I found out once I actually looked at the data. I always assumed that the data was super strong, and then I looked at the data and I'm like, ooh, I think I've been too confident this whole time. So that's kind of what happened to me in college, I guess.
Okay, but was there something specifically that tipped you? I mean, made you leave as a practicing Catholic and become agnostic, or maybe it was just a combination of those things coming together and culminating for you? Is that maybe?
Yeah, it was definitely like a combination of things. There was no day that I woke up and I was like,
Okay.
today, there was no moment. Um, it was just, I remember thinking for a while, yeah, I'm still Catholic. I don't have to believe in transubstantiation to be Catholic. Um, I don't know if I was correct when I said that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the Jesuits are doing some really interesting work in terms of like accepting the real presence without transubstantiation. That's neither here nor there. Um, but like I thought about myself as just like a very liberal Catholic or something like that for a while. Um, and then after a while, I thought about myself as somebody who was like merely Christian, like a la C.S. Lewis, right? Like mere Christianity. And that's when I was going to those crew meetings and stuff like that. Um, and then after a while, I was like, oh man, maybe I'm not even merely Christian. And keep in mind, throughout all of this, I was still going to mass every Sunday. So I hadn't stopped going to mass. I hadn't stopped going to confession, nothing like that. It was all just kind of like this internal thing of my confidence lowering over time.
All right, so take the fewness of the saved, that whole reality, and then take your experience in college with Muslims and Hindus practicing their faith and practicing it very well. And I'm guessing they're loving and compassionate and, the whole 9 yards. Did you have an understanding of Lumen Gentium back then to kind of understand what's going on?
Honestly, no, because I hated Vatican II. Not hate. Hate's a strong word.
Well, yeah, you grew up the way
Um,
you grew up, obviously. Yeah, I can tell. Well,
I
sorry.
thought that Vatican II was a bunch of hippy dippy nonsense that I could safely ignore because none of it's binding anyway. Because Vatican II admitted that it was not going to be an infallible council. It's strictly ecumenical, so I'm safe to ignore it because Vatican II told me I could ignore it, and it's a bunch of hippy dippy nonsense. So why would I even bother reading it? And Lumen Gentium was put out in what, like 65 or something? It was put out as part of Vatican II, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of just ignored it, if I'm being honest.
But you read it later, like you understand it now, right?
Yeah,
Or,
I'd probably have to pull it up if I wanted to like remember exactly, like
oh,
if you're
no,
referring to something in particular.
no. Well, I was just because what's a stumbling block for so many Protestants and Eastern Orthodox is this idea that non-Catholics, or in an Orthodox view, non-Orthodox Christians and non-Christians have the possibility of being saved through invincible ignorance. It's very scandalizing to many non-Catholics. Even Catholics can't even really fully grasp this idea. And so if you're, because it sounds like, your upbringing, your childhood, adolescence, and into your young adulthood, the way it shaped your mind, I think the revelation that you had with your biology class and then your experience with the Hindus and the Muslims, it really kind of messed with your conscience a little bit. Not messed in a good way, not like, you know what I mean? And so
challenged. Yeah.
But do you see the contrast with being indoctrinated with few are going to be saved, and then you experience interfaith fellowship and relationships or whatever, just seeing these Muslims and Hindus? Don't you see like that tension there, maybe how that could mess with you? I don't know. I'm just
No, yeah, absolutely. That is what messed with me. Like, it's easy to believe in the fewness of the saved when everybody that you know
yeah.
is one of the few. But then once you actually go meet people and you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
you're different than I am. Like, now, but you're still my friend. Like, how do you square that circle? You know, it's when it becomes personal, I think it becomes a lot harder to ignore, I guess, is kind of like the main. And you know what's interesting too is that I've had family members express to me that they have moved a lot closer to universalism after I left. And I'm kind of like, well, I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that you can't imagine me being in
Yeah.
hell forever because you know me. I'm your family member. And like, yeah, once you know somebody, that's, yeah. In my experience, the people who hold to the fewness of the saved are the very isolated, insular people who don't personally know anybody who doesn't believe the same stuff as them. Once you actually meet people and you realize that there are good people who are Muslim and good people who are Hindu and atheist and even Novus Ordo Catholic, that's when you.
Oh,
That was a joke, of course.
that's flattering. That's real flattering. Thank you.
No, but
I'm just
once you find out that there are good people
yeah.
who, you know, aren't one of the few, all of a sudden you're faced with like a real challenge, you know?
Well, here's my thing. Don't you feel like, again, I don't want to rip on the FSSP or your childhood and all that stuff, but don't you feel like these fraternities and societies, and then even into sort of a contest, they have this like sense of entitlement where it's like, I am one of the elect, I'm predestined, and everybody else is sent to hell or whatever because everybody else, right? They're just a bunch of hippy dippy, like you said, ecumenists, right? And they view ecumenism as indifferentism, like, oh, everyone's just going to be saved, doesn't matter, you don't need Jesus Christ, you know, you don't need to wear chapel veil, you don't need to wear, you know, pants or whatever, you don't need to pray the rosary every day. And they're just like, wow, what a compromised cop out, right? And it goes and it attacks their rigidity, their life of rigidity and the like pharisaical tendencies, right? Would you say that's kind of, I mean, would you say that mentality and indoctrination real, I mean, I don't want to put words in your heart or mind or mouth, but maybe slightly traumatized or at least did some damage emotionally, psychologically with that, you know, experience?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't want to like speak too harshly about people who aren't here to like, you know, defend themselves. But I'll speak to my experience, and my experience, Pharisaical is a word that I could use to describe my experience. Let me put it to you that way. And my experience absolutely, you know, has like, you know, it's made me almost definitely, and I don't, so I'm going to say something and then I'm going to need to explain it. I am almost definitely biased against the Catholic Church. Okay, what does that mean? I'm not saying that like I hate the Catholic Church or I hate Catholics or anything like that. I do not. I hope that my eagerness to engage with Catholics demonstrates that. But what I do mean is that I had a bad experience, you know, in the Catholic Church, and I know that I'm just a human being. Like, I'm not a Vulcan from Star Trek. You know, I'm not a perfect logic machine. And because I'm not a perfect logic machine, I'm biased, like we all are, right? None of us can escape these fleshy, you know, prisons that hold our minds, right? And my fleshy prison, I think, is biased because of my experiences. So I try to be aware of that, and I try to incorporate that. I try to ask myself, Kevin, do you really think this way because the evidence is pointing this way, or are you just biased because of your bad experiences? I try to ask myself that all the time. But I know that I'm not going to be able to answer that question unbiased, right? Because I am just a human being.
That's honest. That's transparent. I appreciate that. Yeah. So here's a question. Again, you don't have to answer it. Maybe it comes off as kind of weird. I don't know. But do you think maybe that you don't necessarily, oh, what are the words? Forgive me if this comes off the wrong way. You don't necessarily have a bias towards the Catholic Church or contempt towards the Catholic Church or some sort of what's the word? Regret, bitterness, resentment, whatever you want to call it, towards the Catholic Church, but maybe it's a caricature of the Catholic Church and what that is, or like a cult-like version of the Catholic Church. You know what I mean? That's what you really are like. You have all this stuff going on emotionally and mentally with all your experiences in the past, and it's like that's what. But at the same time, you have this, I don't know, flicker of light in your heart, in your mind, that you're at least open. The humility to be open to having made a mistake, right? Am I kind of touching on something there? Or?
You are for sure. So working my way backwards, I do like to think that I am open, and that like if I found some kind of incontrovertible evidence, I would say, hey, great, the game is over. My watch has ended. I can now go and comfortably be Catholic again. And I can kind of be at peace with my journey having ended. That'd be great. I like to think that anyway, but like I said, I know that I'm just a human being. So as much as I might think that I am open-minded, am I really? I try,
Right.
but I don't know. I don't think it's up to me to tell you that I am open-minded, right?
No, yeah, yeah.
You have to tell me that I'm being open-minded,
Well, I get the
but
impression. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to try to answer the first part of your question too. Like, is the bias maybe not against the church so much as it is against a caricature of the church or like a subsect of the church or something?
Yeah.
And part of me wants to say, yeah, because that's how I grew up. But then the other part of me too wants to say, but I don't know. I might have a bias against the Novus Ordo Church as well, because when you grow up like I did, you grow up thinking that all serious Catholics are trad. If somebody's not trad, it's because they're not taking their faith seriously. So I think I'm also biased against Novus Ordo Catholics because of how I was raised. You know what I mean? So I feel like I'm almost biased against the whole church, the trads because of my negative experience being trad, and the non-trads because as a trad, I was taught that all the non-trads are non-serious. You know what I mean? So I've been hit on both sides. And so I worry about my ability to be non-biased on both fronts, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I'll preface my next question with saying, like, I am not here to, well, actually, let me say this. I get the impression that you're following your conscience. And if you are, I think you have nothing to worry about. I mean, I know that sounds patronizing, like, oh, you have nothing to worry about. But I'm just saying, like, if you're following your conscience, no one's out here to proselytize or say, oh, you should return to the Catholic Church. If you're following your conscience, you're I know that sounds patronizing.
No, not at all.
Don't take it that way. That's the impression that I get. So that's a good thing. But I want to ask this though. What's the one impediment or stumbling block, whatever you want to label it, that's preventing you from coming back to the Catholic Church?
Great question. If I had to only pick one thing, this might be a little bit too broad. So if this is too broad, tell me and I'll pick something more specific. But it would probably be the fact that being Catholic has epistemic commitments. So what do I mean by that? I think that it's fairly easy to become Christian, but not Catholic. And you can still be like, yeah, I'm Christian, but I don't believe in the Assumption of Mary or the perpetual virginity of Mary or a papal infallibility, or pick your infallibly defined Catholic doctrine. But if you're going to be Catholic, you do. And I don't think that I have the confidence in all of those various claims. And so the idea that I kind of have to submit my intellect and will to these things that I don't think that and I realize that in a way this can sound prideful, but the way that I look at it is almost like, no, it's more prideful to say I have all the answers. Look, I know about the assumption. I know about papal infallibility. I know the answers to these. I'm just trying to say I don't have the answers to these.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking me to commit to answers. Like, I'm trying to be humble in my epistemic, landscape, as it were. But to be Catholic is to kind of put that humility to the side and say, no, actually, I do know the answers. Why? Because it's been infallibly defined, and I submit my intellect and will to the church. That's probably, if I had to pick one thing, it would probably be that.
That's interesting. So what was your term before? Epistemic knowledge? No.
Yeah, I think I might have said something like epistemic humility. And what I mean by that is just like somebody is epistemically humble if they're admitting, yeah, I don't know. And I don't think that a Catholic can say that. Like if you approach an Orthodox Catholic and you're like, hey, was Mary always a virgin? I don't think that the Catholic's allowed to be like, I don't know, man. The Catholic has to be like, well, I submit my intellect and will to the church, and the church says yes.
But okay, so I'm just gonna push back. I'm not trying.
Do it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like coerce you into believing whatever that you're struggling with. That's not my point. But like when it comes to like the dogmas that we're bound by intellect and will, right? Now, well, let me ask you, what do you think that means? Is it like you have to understand it completely or know all the details, or what do you mean?
No, it's worse. I wish it meant that you have to understand all of it. It's
Oh,
worse
okay.
in the sense that you don't have to understand it. You just have
Oh,
to believe it.
oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, what do you mean by understand it? Because when we're talking about a mystery of faith, it takes faith. You can't have like 100% absolute metaphysical certitude intuitively and knowing it. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, I actually don't think that you could have absolute certitude in anything. Molly, what's she doing? Yeah, I'm not certain about anything. I'm not looking for certainty when I'm like looking for and I don't think that like a belief being justified. I don't think you have to be certain. Like, am I certain that the sun will rise tomorrow? Well, no. But in a conversation, I might say that I know that it is. Why? Because I think that my belief is justified. So that's not my concern. My concern more so is the commitment to the believing it, even if you don't understand it. Like I think that that's like just not what I think a good epistemology is, right? Like I think that a good epistemology is one which admits that it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And instead of jumping to an answer, I think it's more epistemically humble, I think, to be like, yeah, I don't know. But the Catholic doesn't have that option available to them, is my point.
Okay, I just want to clarify. So if someone were to come up to me and ask me, do you believe in the perpetual virginity of Mary? And I would have to say yes, because the church tells me so, but in reality, I don't know. I'm trying to, is that what you mean?
So I might forward some kind of argument like this. The committed faithful Catholic owes submission of intellect and will to the Catholic Church. Submission of intellect and will entails belief, not belief without doubt, but belief.
Right.
The Catholic Church teaches the perpetual virginity of Mary. Therefore, Catholics, faithful Catholics anyway, are obligated to believe in the perpetual virginity of Mary. So if I was a Catholic, like boom, all of a sudden Kevin is Catholic, and then you were like, Kevin, do you believe the perpetual virginity of Mary? I would be obligated, I believe, to say, yes, I do believe that. And if you were like, why? I'd be like, the church tells me to. I don't know, man.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But again, I'm not saying you're doing this, but can't you have both?
What do you mean?
Well, like, yeah, I'm assenting to this because of the church's authority and me being subordinate to that authority, but also I can look into this doctrine and for myself using scripture, tradition, the fathers, theological speculation, all that, and come to a conclusion where, okay, yeah, I do know she's a perpetual virgin.
Well,
It's like,
you're allowed
oh,
to come. You're allowed to come to one conclusion. You're not allowed to come to the other conclusion.
what do you mean?
So if a faithful Catholic said, I really don't think that Mary was a perpetual virgin, and I don't remember the language around her perpetual virginity, but there are certain things where you are anathema, right? So a recent area of interest for me has been the sacramentality of marriage. So at the Council of Trent in the 7th session, canon number 1, it reads like, there are exactly 7 sacraments. They were all instituted by Jesus. They are, baptism, Eucharist, confirmation, last rites, holy orders, matrimony, and which one did I miss? Did I say?
Confirmation?
I think I said confirmation, didn't I?
Oh,
Did I say
Eucharist?
confession? I said
Confession?
Eucharist. Doesn't matter.
We all know what they are. Come
Yeah,
on.
those are the 7. There are exactly 7, no more, no less. They were all instituted by Jesus. If you say otherwise, you are anathema. That is what Canon 1 of the 7th session
Sure.
of the Council of Trent says.
Sure.
I really don't think that marriage as a sacrament was instituted by Christ. I've been doing a deep dive on this for the past couple of weeks, and I really think that marriage wasn't considered a sacrament until like the 11th century. And then the Council of Trent occurred in the 16th century.
Mhm.
So for the first 1,000 years after Christ's death, I don't think that marriage was a sacrament. If I was a Catholic, I think I would have to be like, well, despite all these doubts that I have, I just have to accept the Catholic position. Jesus did institute marriage as a sacrament. Nobody knew about it for 1,000 years, but he did. I submit my intellect and will to the Council of Trent. And that is it. Or else I am anathema. And I think that's probably the biggest roadblock to me, that there's all these different things. Like Catholicism isn't a cafeteria religion.
Right.
Christianity at large can be. Like, you can be Christian. You could attend Pastor Jim Bob's Bible church and not believe in the perpetual virginity of Mary. No problem. Probably. I don't know Pastor Jim Bob, but I assume. You can't do that with Catholicism. Like Catholicism has, and this is not a bad thing. Catholicism has very explicit, like this is what it takes to be in, and if you don't, then you're out. And that's a good thing, right? Like it makes it clear. But it also makes it harder for me to get in because I'm like, well, I don't know about those things. You know what I'm saying? Like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a very broad answer. You said, like, what is the one thing? And I said, like,
Okay.
the one thing is this kind of commitment to things that I don't feel ready to commit to. And I think if the Catholic Church was a little bit more cafeteria, it would be a lot easier. But it's not cafeteria, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, cafeteria Catholic is a very common insult, at least in trad circles.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that everybody should be a cafeteria Catholic. I think if you are, you might be anathematizing yourself. So don't. But if you do doubt one of those things, you can't, if that makes sense.
I just want to say one last thing and then we'll move on. I again, I don't want to like beat this with the dead horse. But like the argument of, did you say the marriage wasn't raised to a sacrament until the 11th century, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And if you don't know the specifics about marriage, don't feel obliged to get into the weeds with me here. We could pick kind of any. That was just a fill in. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. My only question is, like, how do you know that? You know what I'm saying? Like, and you might push back with the argument from silence or whatever, but my thing is like, just because things weren't manifested empirically or whatever, whether that's, tradition, not tradition really, but, sacred scripture or something in the church fathers or something, then really it seems like a novel accretion or just some sort of, new thing that we didn't have from antiquity. Well, I see, I rest at night because I know that whatever Christ did and instituted and all that stuff in the one deposit of faith, really, like tradition and scripture fine, but the liturgy, to me, the liturgy is what encapsulates like dogma, really, all throughout the centuries. So when people, like, we have Protestants and even Orthodox that will challenge us and say, well, there was no evidence or nothing written about this dogma or that, like, why do we have to? What would you say to that?
I mean, I guess I would say you don't have, nobody has to anything.
Yeah,
I guess the question just comes down to like, do we have sufficient, reason to believe something?
sure.
And like when I would look at something like marriage being a sacrament, I think that there really isn't great evidence of marriage being a sacrament until at the very earliest, like the writings of Augustine, in the 5th century. But then really it's more like the 10th century.
Okay.
And if grant that to me just for the sake of conversation, like if that is the case, does that mean that Jesus never said, by the way, guys, here's the 7 sacraments, he lists all 7, and that just never made it into the Gospels? That is entirely possible. And I can't prove that it never happened. Like I can't prove the negative. That being said, I don't think that a good epistemology is one that just believes everything and then only disbelieves things that they don't have good evidence or that they don't have disproving evidence of, right? Because then otherwise you'd wind up believing in a ton of contradictory things, right? If you believed everything except for that which you can disprove, that's a faulty epistemology. So instead, I think that we should only believe the things for which there is sufficient evidence. And I don't think that we have evidence of Jesus saying, by the way, guys, there's only 7 sacraments, right? Just because we don't have any writings of Jesus saying that. Does it mean it's impossible? No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I just don't think that it's like sufficiently likely, if that makes sense.
Okay. This is a good segue since we're talking about marriage. Now you're married.
Mm-hmm.
You've been married for, was it 7 years?
7, yep.
Okay. And
it'll be 7 later this year anyway.
Okay. And your wife and you were married in a Catholic church. Okay. And you were more or less, I don't want to say coerced, but what would you say?
Yeah, coerced is a good word.
To get married in the Catholic Church, right?
Mm-hmm. And our marriage ceremony was not part of a mass. It took about 10 minutes.
Sure.
We didn't buy rings. We didn't dress up. There were like a grand total of like less than 10 people in the chapel during the wedding. So let's see. It was me and my wife, my parents and her parents, her one sister, and the priest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and my grandparents.
Okay.
11. There was 11 people in the chapel. The ceremony took about 10 minutes. After the ceremony was over, we promptly got into our car and drove 700 miles away. So that was our wedding.
And that was at the direction of your parents, right? Like that was them telling you, like,
I feel really bad for the priest who married us. And I like him a lot. And I still write to him every now and then. It's been a while. I should write to him. Thanks for reminding me. I feel bad for him because I think that he was put into a really hard situation. He knew what was going on. He knew that my girlfriend and I did not want to get married, but that my parents were, forcing isn't the right word because I could have said, no, forget you guys. We're leaving. We're not going to, I could have done that. I chose not to. But coercing, he knew about the coercion. But my parents aren't just random people who attend the chapel. Like my grandparents founded the chapel.
Right.
So my family name like matter. Non-Tradicath is not my real last name, just for everyone.
What is that, Slavic?
It's just non-traditional Catholic. Like that's all it is. But it, just smush it all together and then you go. So I think that the priest was like, oh man, do I say no to a non-Tradicath? Like grandma and grandpa non-Tradicath founded this chapel. I can't say no to them.
Yeah.
So I think that he was in a really hard place. And so he did his absolute best to like work with my wife and I. Like he didn't have to go to the bishop to get special permission to marry us, because he knew that we at least wanted to get married to try to save what was left of my relationship with my family. So he worked with us. So I feel, to this day, I feel bad for him. And I bet you that he thinks to himself, like, even all these years later, he's probably like, man, was that the right thing to do? Should I have done that? And I don't know. Maybe he's totally at peace and he's totally, but to his credit, it worked out great. My wife and I are still married. We're, best friends. There's nobody who, by the way, we moved 4 times within 2 years of first getting married. We moved from New Jersey to Illinois, from Illinois to Kentucky, from Kentucky to Pennsylvania, and from Pennsylvania back to Kentucky. The shortest move was like 500 miles or something like that.
Wow.
So all these moves were huge moves, multiple time zones and all that stuff. And I feel like that would test anybody's marriage, moving 4 times within the first 2 years of being married. And it was all from my job. My job was moving me everywhere. And she rolled with it. She went on this crazy adventure with me. She married me, first of all. What the heck? Who would do that? Who would just marry their boyfriend when they were 22 just because, oh, hey, we were going to get married eventually anyway, right? Who does that? A ride or die does it. That's who. And then she moved with me 4 times in the first 2 years after marrying me. What the heck? Like, I don't know what I did to deserve her. She's awesome. So it worked out. So I hope that, Father sleeps well at night, knowing that he married us, because, and my wife and I constantly refer to our marriage as a mistake. Like, we shouldn't have gotten married when we did, or how we did. We should not have done that, but it was a very happy one, and it worked out very well for us. So that's the way that we phrase it.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to something that's completely different. So your grandparents founded that FSSP church out of an old Protestant communion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did they have authority to do that?
To buy the church and turn it into like an unincorporated Catholic church?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think that they asked for permission. I don't know, if I'm being honest. But like, it was an unincorporated Catholic church for a while, which means that it wasn't under any archdiocese. Just priests were just showing up. Like, they would call a priest to be like, hey, will you come say the traditional Latin Mass? And then a priest would show up and say Mass there. And there was no priest assigned to that church for the first couple of years of its existence or whatever.
Do you think? Sorry.
I don't think that they asked permission.
Do you think that experience, and looking back, obviously, maybe at the time you didn't really know what was going on, but that experience, and then that sense and experience of betrayal that you felt with the whole young earth creationism, do you think those things together affect or impact you on how you view authority?
Oh, 100%. What I said about like bias against the church earlier, like, how could I not be biased? After, I think that you could change the word the Catholic Church and just put that to authority, like, even in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that still applies. But then, like, Catholic authority, like, doubly so, it applies. 100%. We're all, unfortunately, right? We are all prisoners. We're all locked within these fleshy machines that we have. And my fleshy machine went through something that I think makes my fleshy machine very biased. How could it not? How could I not be biased? If I told you that I'm this perfect logic machine, totally unbiased, even after what I went through, I think that would be a lie.
Do you think you have a certain kind of hope to undo all that? Again, I'm not trying to,
I don't. So I do think that I have a hope. I don't think that it's a hope to, like, I don't ever hope that one day I'm going to be perfectly unbiased. I don't think anybody is perfectly unbiased about anything ever. We're all, unfortunately, human beings, frail and fallible as we are. But I do have hope of being able to work past my biases, right? I think that I'm doing that right now, but that's the thing about biases, right? You always think that you're not biased. Nobody ever is like, oh yeah, I hate that thing because I'm biased against it. You know what I mean? Nobody ever says that. To you always appear unbiased. So I think that I'm seeing past my biases right now. But am I? I don't think that's for me to say.
Sure. And then when you were in college and you were exposed. I don't know if that's the right word, but exposed
Yeah.
to, you know, other religions and people living out their faiths. Did you ever think about exploring other faiths, other religions, and not just become agnostic, or was it just straight agnostic?
Only Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never seriously entertained becoming Hindu, becoming Muslim, becoming Buddhist, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Partially, I think because I took apologetics classes when I was like in like 8th grade. And these apologetics classes were literally just let's make fun of the other religions. Ha ha, Mormons wear holy underwear. Ha ha, isn't that silly? As I play with my scapular that I'm wearing. Like, come on. But I don't think I ever really took any non-Christian religion seriously
Mm-hmm.
because of my very trad upbringing. So I honestly never considered Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism. I did consider myself a mere Christian for a hot second. Um, I also never considered Orthodoxy, really.
Mm-hmm.
I've been inside of Orthodox churches before. Um, my nephew is baptized in the Macedonian Orthodox Church, so I've been to his uh, uh, baptism, his chrismating or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
Uh,
good mission.
yeah, so that was interesting. But I've also never super considered Orthodoxy, if I'm being 100% honest. The only real options that I've like considered are Catholicism, and then like a mere Christianity.
Sure. I want to just touch on this 8th grade apologetics class. I don't mean to laugh. It just what. So, can you just go into a little more detail, because I think this is kind of important, relevant to this whole discussion. Like, what kind of things were they teaching you, and in regards to, like, it sounded like polemical tendencies or accusations or whatever against other religions and faiths or non-Catholics. Like, what was going on there?
So yeah, that was only a part of the class. We spent the whole probably first 3/4 or maybe even 4/5 or something like that of the year kind of doing your standard kind of apologetics. Like, let's start from nothing. How can we prove that God exists? Okay, let's do Aquinas's 5 ways. Okay, let's do Anselm's ontological argument. Let's so we kind of do all those things. Okay, great. So we know that there's a God. Well, how do we know that like Jesus is God? Okay, great. Let's talk about the gospels and eyewitness testimony. And okay, great. Now we've got Jesus and we've got God. So we're in some kind of Christianity. How do we know that it's the Catholic Church is one church? Okay, now let's talk about papacy. Let's talk about, that line in Matthew about, you are Peter and upon this rock about, let's talk about all that stuff. Okay, great. So that was the first 80% or whatever. And that was all fine. But then we got to the end of the year where I think we had we had extra time and it was like, what should we cover now? And so what we covered was like, now that we've kind of built up Catholicism, let's tear all the other religions down just to really drive it home. And what this resulted in was just like a several week period of just like every week, let's like pick another religion and just make fun of it for a week.
Are you serious? Your teacher did that?
Yeah.
Dude, you know how messed up that is?
My teacher was a priest. And I distinctly remember making fun of the Mormons for having holy underwear.
For having what?
Holy underwear for the Mormons.
What is that? Holy underwear? I've never heard of that.
Oh, you don't know about that? The Mormons wear temple garments. Do you know about that whole thing?
No.
So Mormons have.
I don't want to make fun of them. So let's just.
Yeah, Mormons will wear temple garments. Devout Mormons wear them all the time. Less devout Mormons might only wear them at church or to the temple or whatever. But they are like long john looking things that they'll wear under you don't see the garments, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are under everything. And we thought that was so funny that they wear special clothes underneath their other clothes.
And here I am.
We were all wearing brown scapulars. We were all enrolled in the brown scapular when we received Holy Communion.
Oh, I see.
When we were 7 years old.
Okay, yeah.
The brown scapular is it's not the exact same thing, but it's also a form of holy. Like, if we can make fun of the Mormons for wearing holy underwear, why can't they make fun of us for wearing the scapular? But of course that was lost. That was entirely lost on me at the time. And we would make fun of Muslims, for like I remember reading in a book somewhere, like the unit on Islam started with Muhammad was a man who loved to make up religions, and then it would go on and on about Muhammad, and I'm just like, guys, like I don't think you understand how like religions work. So yeah, it was uh by the way, I didn't touch on this a whole lot, but there was other wild stuff that I learned in this church, such that like women shouldn't be allowed to vote. By the way, the person who taught me that was a woman. She was my 5th grade teacher. And she said that women shouldn't have the right to vote. Um, uh, one of the suggested essays at the end of like one of our history books was what are the duties and the rights of Black people in modern America? When was this book written? Like 1960 or 1961 or something. But we were using it because like it was pre 1962, pre Vatican II, and
Right. Yeah.
um,
Oh,
uh,
God. Just
so, so I'm not saying that like my chapel wasn't legitimately suggesting that we write an essay on what rights should Black people have. That's not the case. They didn't. They said you're not allowed to write an essay on this topic, because I don't think they wanted to be racist. I don't think that they were racist, not against Black people anyway. But that just goes to show you the kinds of ideas that were percolating in that culture. It's like, yes, it was the early 2000s, but in some ways it was kind of like the 1950s, you know, it
right.
was stuck.
Yeah. Traditionalists.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is okay. I'm just going to give my little 2 cents. Take it or leave it. This is just my opinion. I don't want to pretend to know your heart and your mind and what you've been through and all that. That is not my business, even. But since I became Catholic 10 years ago, um, I haven't been scandalized, but I've been really disheartened and disappointed at this whole radical traditionalist movement and the experiences I've had with people. For instance, you know, if you can't find a mass said in Latin, then don't go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we believe that. Yeah.
How about this? How about this? If there's not a TLM offered, celebrated, whatever, where you live, move.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you know, and just a lot of different things that I've seen. You know, and Pope Francis, I love Pope Francis, so I'm just going to say this, but he's right on the button when he says that a lot of these people, they're endorsing a type of ideology. It's like backwardism, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're living in the past and they're stuck and stagnant. And like you said, what did you say? Like they're an isolated few, you know, elect, and to the detriment of everyone outside of their ideological circle. And I just can't stand it. I just So when people ask me, "Oh, Latin Mass, Novus Ordo," I'm like, I love the Latin Mass. I think it's one of the most beautiful liturgies. It's aesthetically just so traditional. Just, dude, I mean, come on. It's not about that. But when you start worshiping the liturgy and not God, and then it turns into this like everyone else is a heretic and we're the select few, the fewness of the saved, right? And again, I don't know your heart and your experience. Only you do, but I'm just gonna say if that was me, that would have messed me up. And just
I
royally.
am messed up, for the record. I am messed up. So don't worry. I'm
not saying that. I'm not saying that, dude. I'm not saying that. But
no, I know that you weren't. You were implying that I wasn't, and I was setting the record straight for the audience. That
okay,
no,
yeah, right.
contrary. I do a good job hiding it, but no.
Yeah, good clarification. I just honestly, we've talked twice. Well, we've emailed, but it just breaks my heart, and I have so much righteous indignation towards this whole Latin ideology or traditionalism. I can't stand it. It's just purely Pharisaical. And I'm just getting that out. So let's end on a good note. Let's have a little bit of fun. Okay. Let's have a
Sounds
little bit
good.
of, yeah, dude, we got to have some fun and humor. This can't be
I
all
like it.
serious. So this is like, come on, what's going on here? Actually, let me just sneak these two questions in first. So
Sure. Yeah.
have you, when was the last time you went to mass? Was it 7 years or how long?
No, I don't go regularly, but I did go to mass 2 years ago or something like that. I've been to mass a few times since then.
Right on.
I don't attend regularly though, so don't let me
Yeah.
fool you.
Yeah. When's the last time you prayed the rosary or
I'm gonna be honest. It's been more than 7 years. I'm I I'm not a fan of
you
the
know,
rosary, if
that's
I'm being honest.
that's fine. You don't have to be a fan of the rosary.
And not because I think that there's something wrong with like Our Lady of the Rosary, or not because I think that there's something wrong. I just found myself um being distracted the entire time because it just becomes such a normal thing to like to say it over and over that you don't have to think about it while you say it. And then instead of meditating on the mysteries, I was thinking about my homework assignment or whatever,
Yeah.
and not thinking about the mysteries, which I know that's the whole point.
Right.
Um, I wound up much preferring like meditative prayer that wasn't rosary. It wasn't repetition based. It was kind of like almost like a guided like a guided meditation type deal. You know what I'm saying? But about various mysteries of the faith, quite like the rosary, just without the repeating the Hail Mary
Yeah.
part.
Yep. Gotcha.
That's
It's
yeah.
not, it's not required to pray the rosary by the Catholic Church.
Of
So,
course. And that was an entirely personal thing for me. My
yeah.
point was only that I didn't find it personally efficacious. I found it more like I just zoned out for 15 minutes and I was like, oh, I'm done. All I thought about was my homework.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just didn't think that was efficacious for me. But that's not to say that it can't be efficacious for other people. That was kind of, yeah.
So how did you come across my channel? Is it just in your news feed or?
Yes. And I have to admit, I came into your first stream with like a little bit of trepidation because it said debate in the title.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm not a debate bro kind of guy. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy having conversations like the one we just did. Conversations where people might disagree on a lot of big topics. And that's like I'm totally cool disagreeing with somebody. I just don't love the whole debate bro culture of like, oh, debate me, bro. What's your opening statement? Here's my first rebuttal. Here's my second rebuttal. Like, okay, can we have a conversation like normal human beings?
Yeah.
Like I would much rather, and hey, if we could do this in person over a beer or a cup of coffee, that would be even better than what we just did over the phone like this. But even this to me is infinitely better than an actual debate.
Yeah.
And debate was in the title of the video. And I didn't know anything about you at the time. So I was like a little nervous clicking on it. And I was like, oh man, if I say that I'm not Catholic, like, am I going to be beaten up and then nobody beat me up. Everybody was super welcoming. You, of course, were super welcoming. You invited me onto the stream right away.
Yeah.
And so my worries were quickly put to bed, but I did have that initial like, what am I getting myself into?
So let me just tell you. So you'll be probably surprised that I don't like formal moderated debates. I think hold on. I don't think they're that constructive and fruitful for the edification of people. Again, I'm not saying for all people, but I mean, come on. Which interlocutor converted his opponent? Like what has that?
Never.
No, because they're there to win an argument, not a soul 99% of the time. And really egos just get puffed up and ad hominems. Oh my gosh. So when I have debate in there, I'll tell you straight up, I really want a Protestant to come in and have a cordial discussion. And it's kind of clickbaity when it says debate. So I've had people come in and you know what I say right away before I even bring them in? I say, this is an informal, unmoderated discussion, and it's going to be done in charity, cordiality. Okay. No ad hominems. We're not going to talk over each other. And if that were to happen, I'd boot them faster than a New York minute. You know, I'm not. You know what I mean? So like I know there's that stigma to debate, but that's why I have that there. It's just to get people to maybe come on. But there are YouTube channels out there. I don't need to name names, but literally that's all they do. Every stream they do. And I'm talking about unmoderated, informal debates, and it's just vitriol, just this vile, crude, crass, whatever, just polemics. Just, oh my gosh, it's so bad. It's so bad. Okay, anyways, well, I'm gonna ask you some fun questions.
Let's do it.
Wait, you were born and raised in New Jersey, right?
Technically, I was born in Pennsylvania. I was born. Here's a fun fact for you. Me and another famous Catholic were both born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. Now, this other famous Catholic was Jesus Christ, and he was born in Bethlehem and Nazareth in the Middle East. And I was born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, but my parents lived in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, but the hospital just so happened to be in Bethlehem. So they drove, 10 minutes from their house to the hospital, gave birth to me, and then quickly went home to Nazareth, Pennsylvania. But I was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. So
that's crazy. What are the odds of that?
Like, isn't that funny? And here's the thing. I wasn't even raised in Nazareth. My parents lived there at the time that I was born, but we moved to New Jersey when I was like 4 years old or something. So was I even raised in Nazareth? Not really. If you ask me, where are you from? I will say New Jersey, because my first memories are in New Jersey, and I lived there from ages 4 to 22. So
yeah,
I'm from New Jersey, but I was technically born in Nazareth or Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. It's just a fun, pseudo joke. It's true, kind of. But yeah.
All right. I know you don't. I know you have cats, so we're gonna play the either or game. I know they're all false dichotomies. Okay. Okay. So cats or snakes?
Cats. I have both, but cats.
Coke or Pepsi, and I'm talking about the soda Coke.
Right. Are we talking regular or diet?
Whatever.
Because Pepsi is better than Coke, but Diet Coke is better than Diet Pepsi.
Okay, right on.
I really only drink diet, so Diet Coke is my answer.
Okay, whiskey or bourbon? I mean, I know that's kind of the same thing.
Bourbon is a type of whiskey.
Okay.
But I will say that I like bourbon more than other non-bourbon whiskeys.
What's your favorite bourbon?
My go-to is Knob Creek 9-year. I said that's my go-to because I can buy the massive 1.5 liter bottles for like $70 and it lasts me forever. So I love that. But like I do own a bottle of Blanton's that I paid like $150 for or whatever. Ooh. And it's like 750 ml. So it's half the size and 3 times as expensive as Knob Creek 9-year. But I've owned the bottle for several years now and I've had like 2 shots worth of it over the last 2 years. I've only broken it out on special occasions. So there's 2 answers for you. Favorite overall and then favorite daily driver kind of bourbon.
Okay. Did you or do you still have a favorite Catholic saint?
Ooh. So my confirmation name is St. John Vianney.
Nice.
So he was my favorite, at least at the time that I got confirmed. But if you asked me today, who's your favorite Catholic saint? I do love St. Maximilian Kolbe. I think that his story is just very like inspiring from a completely secular point of view, even. Sure. But I also love like some of the mythical stories. Like I love the St. Christophers and stuff like that. The St. Georges. Yeah. If I had to only pick one, I'll pick St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Awesome. St. Augustine or St. Thomas Aquinas? I bet I know the answer to this, but I'll let you.
St. Augustine.
You know why?
Oh, why did you know? Why did you know?
Because of your disdain for Aristotle.
Oh, very good. Yes, okay. That's exactly the reasoning that I had in my head.
I am a St. Augustine fan too. Did you know?
I knew we'd be friends.
Yeah, St. Thomas Aquinas quoted him 3,300 times.
Is that true? 3,300 times?
Wow. In his Summa, yeah.
That's wild.
You know which Dr. Saint the Catechism quotes the most?
St. Thomas Aquinas?
No.
No?
No.
St. Augustine?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I
Dude,
am surprised. That's awesome.
just look in the back of the index. It says like how many times these people are quoted. And yeah, I think St. Augustine's got St. Thomas Aquinas by like 20
Um,
quotes.
I own this big collection of like the works of the fathers, and it's literally like it's so many writings are in this thing, but I own it digitally, so I don't think I've ever appreciated it. If I owned it physically, the book would be this thick, but like this much of it would be Augustine. Like
Yeah,
the dude wrote so much.
he did.
He was a beast.
He was a beast. I'm trying to think of another question. Mexican or Chinese food?
Oh, good one. Mexican, but if it was Japanese, I would pick Japanese over Mexican.
Oh, have you had Japanese ramen bowls?
I have, but
Yeah,
I literally got sushi for dinner today.
nice,
So I live right down the street from an amazing sushi place, the best sushi in all of Kentucky.
nice. You don't do Lent, do you?
No, but I not strictly speaking.
Yeah.
But normally during Lent, I am like I should do something, and so I have started trying to work out a little bit more. I had gotten away from working out, so I was like, let me try to work out a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, I'm not doing Lent, but this time of year does seem to inspire me to try to make positive changes.
Nice. All right, man. Do you have any questions for me or anything else you'd want to say or
I have one question that I generally like to ask people,
uh-oh,
and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
good.
do you have any advice for me? Put yourself in my shoes,
Yep.
and think like, um, you know, what would you do if you kind of found yourself in my shoes? That's kind of like uh, the question, and it's very self-serving because I want to know what I want the advice.
Boy, I want to think and be careful. I don't want to hastily
I would
just
return to Rome, Kevin. That's what I would do.
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, wow, that is a question, man, because I think I mean, on the surface, I know your journey and your story pretty well. And again, I don't want to make judgments or unjust suspicions about like why you are what you are, or why you did this or why you didn't do that. That's not for me to say. Oh boy. Well, I kind of already alluded to it earlier, and I mean so the conscience, right? The conscience is everything. If you're honestly following it and have true fidelity to your conscience, I think that's the most important thing. Um, I think, um, I mean, the key though is having a formed conscience, or at least not having a darkened intellect. And I'm not trying to assume your life, how moral or immoral your life is, but I can speak to this because a lot of people just secularly, religiously, wherever their conscience is bound or it's darkened or whatever, their intellect is darkened because of their habitual attachment to sin and whatever. And so it's like listening to your conscience. Well, you got to detach yourself from that. It's grace, don't get me wrong, and you got to like cooperate with what God gives us. I mean, I know you're agnostic, but um I don't know. I think I've never met somebody like you in your position ever.
That's fair. I'm a rare breed in that sense.
Yeah, the thing that's most intriguing to me is that your heart doesn't seem hardened. Your conscience doesn't seem sullied. And to me, it seems like you are giving an honest shot with what you're given. And I think you're fine. I think you're okay. I think just, do what you think is right, what your conscience tells you, and stay how you are. I think you're fine. I think you're fine.
That means a lot to me. Thank you. And I'll quote the crushing ending to "The Sun Also Rises." and say, "Isn't it pretty to think so?" With regards to, I like to think that my intellect is not super darkened, that my heart is not too hardened. I like to think so, but again, that's not for me to tell you, "Oh, my
Right.
intellect is crystal clear. My heart is
Right.
as soft as it." That's not for me to tell you, but it
Right.
does mean a lot to me that you would say that. So thank you. And as much as I like to think that those things are true, I know that I have a lifetime ahead of me to make sure that that is the case. So
Yeah.
I've got my homework cut out for me.
Yeah. You'll be fine, man. I'll, I know you're agnostic, but I'll still pray for you.
And that means a lot to me. And sometimes people are like, "Do you mind if I pray for you?" And I'm always like, "Please do." Because think about it from your perspective, is that you've got a line to literally the most powerful, most good being in existence. And you're like, "Do you mind if I put in a good word for you?" Yeah, of course, put in a good word for me. And I get that other people in my shoes do get weird about that. And so I appreciate when people are like, "Can I pray for you?" But the answer is always emphatically, "Yes, you absolutely can." I always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, here, tomorrow's Tuesday. I'll offer my mass, my rosary, my divine chaplet mercy for you.
Thank you so much. That really does mean the world to me. It really does.
Yeah, of course. Let's stay in touch. Maybe do this again sometime in the future. I don't know. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on my channel initially in that live stream and then being open to doing an interview with me. I think it's really edifying for me, really fruitful. And yeah, I'm very grateful that you took all this time out of your night to talk with me. It's been beautiful. It's been amazing.
I'm so grateful that you had me on. I've loved our conversation. Um, I I was kind of not kidding at the beginning when I said that this whole YouTube project was selfish. It was letting me talk to, the best and the brightest. And you now count among the ranks of these best and brightest that I've got to speak to. And it really does mean a lot to me that you took the time to talk, because I'm just some kid with questions, and the fact that you took the time to spend almost 2 hours with me,
Mhm.
it really does mean the world to me. So thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're most welcome, Kevin. And that'll do her. So yeah, stay in touch, man. Yeah, you'll have to give me Jimmy Akin's email. No, I'm just kidding. Dude, I know how to get a hold of him, and he goes on like anybody's channel.
He does. He's the
Yeah,
best.
he is the best. So yeah, cool, Kevin. Well, yeah, you have a good night, and thanks again. Appreciate it.
Same to you, man.
All right,
Thanks.
man. Yeah, God bless.
All right. Bye.